In the world of celebrities, where fame seems to give the feeling of absolute power, some even dare to defy the sacred. Words spoken in a tone of irony or disdain may even draw laughs in the moment, but when followed by tragic and unexpected endings, they take on an almost prophetic air. That is exactly what we are going to see here today. In 2015, the fighter Conor McGregor made a very controversial statement during an interview that, because of his words, caused worldwide revulsion. On that occasion, in an interview for the TMZ Sports website, Conor McGregor was provocatively asked what a hypothetical showdown with Jesus Christ inside an octagon would be like. With his customary provocative style, he replied, "Me against Jesus in the octagon? There is not a man alive who can beat me, but Jesus is not alive, so I do not know. Maybe he can come back from the dead, I do not know. Even so, I would give him a beating." This statement was widely reported in the press at that time, and coincidentally, after the interview, the fighter, despite being in the spotlight at that moment and even winning some fights, soon began to encounter difficulties, lost bouts, and in the end, lost his belt for good. Would it be one more possible divine punishment suffered by Conor? Well, we will never know, but many people insist that yes. On March 4, 1966, John Lennon became involved in one of the biggest controversies of his career. During an interview with the British newspaper The Evening Standard, the musician stated that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus Christ. The statement did not cause controversy when it originally aired in the United Kingdom. However, months later, as soon as it was republished in a teen magazine in the United States of America, there were angry reactions from Christian communities. After the statement, some radio stations in the United States of America stopped playing Beatles songs. In addition, their records were burned in public. The controversy coincided with the group's tour of the country in August of 1966. Lennon and the band's manager, Brian Epstein, tried to minimize the crisis by giving a series of press conferences. Some of them had to be cancelled after the musicians received threats. 14 years after his controversial statement, John Lennon ended up losing his life when he was murdered by a man who claimed to be his fan at the door of his residence. The man pulled out a gun and fired 5 times at the musician. Many attributed his death and tragic end to the statement made 14 years earlier. John's statement was so negative and ill-regarded that even the Vatican issued a note condemning Lennon's comments. Right after the controversy, Lennon still tried to apologize numerous times in some interviews, claiming he had been misunderstood. Bon Scott was a singer well known for being one of the vocalists of the iconic rock band AC/DC. It was with him that the band released one of the group's most famous songs, called Highway to Hell. At the time, according to reports, Bon helped compose the song and was very happy with the release. However, shortly after the debut of the album in which the song appeared, the singer was found already lifeless inside a car. Of course, as could not be otherwise, many people who did not agree much with the band's style and with the song's lyrics drew a connection between Bon's death and a divine punishment that literally put the singer on the highway to hell. The official cause of his death was declared to be acute alcohol poisoning after a night of drinking. According to reports, Bon had choked on his own vomit. Nevertheless, the story surrounding his death remains mysterious and controversial to this day. Not even the President of the Republic could escape a divine punishment, as supposedly was the case of Tancredo Neves. The then-elected president of Brazil in the year 1985 is said to have declared shortly before his inauguration that not even Jesus could take his mandate away. The phrase soon began to spread, and shortly thereafter, strange things began to happen in Tancredo's life. One day before his inauguration, Tancredo fell ill and was hospitalized in serious condition, thus unable to attend the event to finally take office as president. However, what theoretically would be temporary persisted. The president's condition then worsened, and a short time later, he died from an infectious disease. Although he was elected president of the Republic, Tancredo did not even get to assume the office. In his place, the elected vice president José Sarney took the post, becoming the first civilian to occupy the presidency after 21 years of military dictatorship. Madalyn Murray O'Hair was an atheist activist and founder of the American Atheists Organization, recognized for her frank and controversial stance against the interference of religion in public life. Murray gained notoriety when, in 1960, she filed a lawsuit against the public school system in Baltimore, in the United States of America, to prevent her son from being forced to recite prayers and read the Bible at school. The case gained repercussion and was taken to the Supreme Court of the United States of America, which declared these practices in public schools unconstitutional in 1963. As a result of her activism, Life magazine nicknamed her the most hated woman in America in 1964. In every interview she gave, she always made a point of expressing her dissatisfaction with religion and her disbelief in God or Jesus. Curiously, on August 27, 1995, Madalyn, her son John Garth Murray, and her granddaughter Robin mysteriously disappeared. After an intense investigation, it was discovered that they had been kidnapped, extorted, and murdered by former associates of the American Atheists Organization, led by David Rowland Waters. Their bodies were only found in 2001 on a ranch in the south of Texas. Identification was possible through dental records, and Waters' testimony was essential for locating the remains. In December of 2023, the Turkish deputy Hasan Bitmez of the Felicity Party, Saadet Partisi, suffered a heart attack and fainted immediately after finishing an inflammatory speech in the Turkish parliament, in which he stated that Israel would face the wrath of Allah. On the floor, he spoke criticizing the economic relationship between the Turkish government and Israel, accusing it of complicity and stating that even if you escape history, you will not escape the wrath of Allah. Images and videos captured the moment when Bitmez falls to the ground, hits his head on the marble floor, and is immediately helped by colleagues who tried to revive him with cardiac massage. He was quickly transported to the hospital in an extremely serious condition. Angiography exams revealed that the two main veins of the heart were completely blocked. 2 days later, Bitmez died at Ankara City Hospital. His speech had a strong political and religious tone, condemning Israel and criticizing the Turkish government for maintaining trade with the country amid the war in Gaza. Many believe that his death was a kind of punishment or retribution for his speech. Cazuza was, and still is, an icon of Brazilian music who, unfortunately, left us still early, in 1990. The singer, despite all his talent, always led a very controversial life, with various appearances drunk and under the influence of drugs, and, for him, his exposure did not seem to be a problem. Cazuza also always made clear his indignation with the church, all because he did not agree with some positions of the institution, always very mocking. During a show he performed at the venue known as Canacau, in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, the singer was using cannabis. At a certain moment then, he takes a drag on the cigarette, blows it into the air and says, "This one is for you, Jesus." The moment of mockery and irony caused the incident to reverberate a lot throughout the country. Shortly after the controversial phrase, Cazuza contracted the AIDS virus and died as a result of it.
Chama tudo uma besteira, entendeu? Sempre tive horror a padre, a tudo quanto fala de religião, budismo, meditação. Vários amigos meus entraram nessa, eu debochava.
Many Christians who were totally against the singer's lifestyle and also his statements, like the last one cited, quickly convinced themselves that the disease and the artist's death came as a punishment. Thomas Andrews, the naval engineer responsible for building the Titanic, is often associated with the famous phrase, "Not even God can sink this ship." However, there is a controversy around this statement. Many believe that the true author of the phrase was the ship's captain, Edward Smith, who would have said it when asked about the supposed vulnerability of the ocean liner in relation to icebergs. Well, regardless of who uttered the phrase, we know that in the end, the ship collided with an iceberg and, yes, sank into the sea, taking many lives and going down in history. The famous phrase about the Titanic represents human arrogance in believing in the invulnerability of its creations. The Titanic was conceived and built in an era of great technological advances, in which society saw itself at the height of its achievements. The confidence placed in the ship was so immense that it was believed impossible for something so grand and modern to be destroyed. Logan Paul, a content creator here on YouTube of enormous success, is a figure that is, at the very least, quite controversial. Since the beginning of his career, Logan has had many ups and downs, posting controversial videos, fighting with other YouTubers, and even starting a completely different new career as a boxer. Today, with more than 20 million subscribers on his channel, Logan Paul has already posted several videos apologizing for numerous things he did wrong or failed to do. However, one of those videos in which he admits fault, which draws a lot of attention, is that of a podcast in which he confesses that he was punished by the wrath of God after cursing Jesus Christ. Logan told his friend that he needed to seek help from psychologists for believing in Jesus. At the time, his friends tried to warn him that disrespecting other people's faith could be very dangerous, but he persisted even more, mocking and cursing Jesus for anyone who wanted to hear. Shortly afterward, he returned to the same program and apologized, saying that the next few days of his life after cursing Jesus were terrible. Several bad things began to happen to him, but the worst of them was severe food poisoning, which left him thinking he would even lose his life. He understood his trials as a divine sign and no longer spoke ill about God. In addition, he made a point of warning people about the situation, serving as an example. The comedian Heather McDonald suffered a big scare during a performance in the American city of Tempe, in the state of Arizona, when she fainted at the beginning of her stand-up comedy show. Through videos and eyewitnesses, we can see that shortly before fainting, the comedian spoke first about the coronavirus vaccine and, right afterward, about how much God loved her. But, of course, in an ironic and visibly mocking manner. As soon as she finishes talking about God then, she gets dizzy and collapses hard onto the floor. She ended up suffering a skull fracture, but she was fine. According to reports, many thought the collapse was part of the show. Doctors present in the audience offered first aid as soon as it was clear the fainting was not a joke. The comedian was taken to the hospital by her sister-in-law, who was in the audience, where she underwent several tests, including a computed tomography scan, and remained hospitalized for a few days. Freddie Mercury was one of the greatest names in the history of music. With his powerful voice and unique stage presence, he helped transform Queen into one of the most famous bands in the world. But beyond talent, he also liked to provoke, including when the subject was religion. During an interview, for example, he was asked whether he preferred to go to heaven or to hell. He replied that he preferred hell because there should be more interesting people there and that heaven seemed tedious. This statement was recorded on video and repeated in various biographies of him. Years later, Queen released an album called Made in Heaven, the last with vocals recorded by Freddie before his death. Many people saw this as an irony or even as a contrast with what he said before. Another curiosity that fuels this mystical side of the story was a performance in which Freddie appeared wearing a diamond glove that, according to himself, would have been a gift from the devil. Freddie died young, at 45 years old. When the news came out, people could not help but connect the dots, reaching the conclusion that he suffered some kind of divine punishment because of the things he said. In 2019, the Brazilian journalist Ricardo Boechat, alongside Danilo Gentili, went viral in a video in which he appears simulating a news report about the return of Jesus. It was a satire, with an ironic tone, as if Judgment Day had become a national holiday. They even said that the Vatican no longer had space near the stage. The tone was one of mockery. They laughed, staged it, and joked about the apocalypse as if it were a press conference. For many people, it went unnoticed. For others, the incident was seen in a very bad light, especially for those who saw it as disrespectful to the Christian faith. Days after this recording, Ricardo Boechat died in a helicopter accident at 66 years old. He had just given a lecture in Campinas, Brazil, and was returning to Sao Paulo, Brazil. The aircraft crashed while attempting an emergency landing and collided with a truck on the Rodoanel. Boechat and the pilot did not survive.
E atenção, Jesus acaba de chegar à Terra. De acordo com especialistas, esta é a segunda vez que o fenômeno acontece.
It did not take long for people to start connecting the dots. They said he mocked the return of Jesus and, shortly afterward, had his fate sealed. Coincidence? Punishment? Or just another tragic case among so many? The fact is that there is no evidence that the video has any connection with the death. The recording was old, and the accident was a fatality. But the story continues to make the rounds, especially among those who believe that, with certain things, you do not joke. Marilyn Monroe was, and still is, one of the greatest icons we have ever had in history. Marilyn's birth record revealed the name Norma Jean Mortensen, but her baptismal record presents a different name, Norma Jean Baker. She only legally changed her name to Marilyn Monroe in 1956, when she was already famous. Throughout the 1950s, she rose to prominence as a sex symbol, being, for example, the first cover of the men's magazine Playboy in 1953. With a life marked by fame and excess, many of Marilyn's close friends say that she always showed herself to be against the church and the figure of Jesus. One of these people, the famous evangelical pastor Billy Graham, says he visited the artist on a certain day and talked to her about God, trying to bring him into her life, but she simply turned and said, "I do not need your God." A few days after this meeting, Marilyn was found lifeless in her home, the victim of an overdose. With a jet-set life marked by many controversies, even in a supposed relationship with the then President of the United States of America, John Kennedy, Marilyn began to take many antidepressants and to use drugs, which culminated in her death. Friedrich Nietzsche was one of the most controversial names in modern philosophy. He had sharp ideas and a serious grudge against any kind of religion. Raised in a Christian home, he became an outspoken critic of Christianity and became known for the famous phrase that, to this day, many people have heard, "God is dead." In the final years of his life, Nietzsche collapsed. In 1889, when he was living in Turin, Italy, one day he saw a coachman beating a horse in the street. The scene was so heavy for him that the philosopher ran over, embraced the animal, and began to cry. They say he whispered something in the animal's ear, and after that he never again spoke coherently. From then on, his mind unraveled for good. He spent his last 10 years in silence, writing letters with signatures such as the Crucified and the Antichrist. He was diagnosed with a serious neurological condition and became totally dependent on his family. Some theories point to excessive use of substances, others to an infection contracted in the bars he frequented. In any case, the thinker who mocked faith spent his last days reclusive, not accountable for himself. And the most ironic thing is that his last words, spoken to his mother, are said to have been, "I am an idiot." Don't forget to subscribe so you can watch more videos like this.